What's going on, everybody? Ryan Miner of Face Off Sports Network, and Week 5 has been nothing but fantasy football goodness. From Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, heck, DJ Moore finally showed up. We had a lot of great plays. And I'm recording this right now as the Kansas City and New Orleans Saints game's going on. So if I miss those players, this is the reason why, because I am recording, people. Be sure to follow me on X at @RyanMiner_FFB. Be sure to follow the show at FF Faceoff. Also, go to fffaceoff.com for all your fantasy football needs. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Now, with all those good fantasy football games we had, you look at some of those scores, those guys, how many points they get you? 2, 3 points. Look at like players like Deebo Samuel, didn't do so well. This week, we're going to talk about some Week 5 players who I'm in panic on, and maybe you should be looking to in panic too as we start preparing for Week 6. Let's get started. Thursday night was a great night for fantasy football. I mean, Kirk Cousins lit up the board, over 40 fantasy points. Darnell Mooney, 2 touchdowns. Drake London, had a hot, solid performance. But one guy who did not have a solid performance was Bijan Robinson. And we're looking at a solid matchup here, too. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were giving up 18 fantasy points on average to the running back position. Yet for a third week in a row, Bijan Robinson has yet to live up to expectations. Heck, even the whole season, he has not put up 20 fantasy points. You would think the way that Atlanta Falcons offense was humming, that Robinson would be able to put in an RB1 week. But that didn't happen. What ended up happening was Robinson ended up finishing with 12 rushes for 61 yards, tagging on along that 3 catches for 16 yards. 76 total yards is not what we want to see out of our RB1. Not to mention, no touchdowns once again. And for the season, here we are, 5 weeks in, Bijan Robinson has 1 touchdown. Totally unacceptable, right? For what it was worth, the Falcons offense kind of had a pass-heavy approach this week, and it was crazy as Kirk Cousins had almost 60 pass attempts. Now, mind you, it was a back-and-forth game, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers didn't have to throw that often. And you think that Robinson would have had more attempts, at least especially around the goal line. But no, it was just, pass heavy. Even Kyle Pitts was involved. It was so crazy. So for an offense that we thought would feature Robinson, it still hasn't turned to come to fruition. It's almost like Arthur Smith's still there, if you ask me. For now, I'm kind of having him as a panic level as a 3. And you look at that, it's kind of like, why do you say 3? And what I'm saying is, I look at him as a 3 because, yeah, he hasn't lived up to expectation last couple of weeks. He's still getting the carries. He's still split with Tyler Algier. But next week is a nice bounce back against the Carolina Panthers. But as of right now, I don't see Robinson as an RB1. Yes, the name-wise RB1. But for fantasy, I can see him more with a RB2 with upside. So I'm going to put his panic level as a 5 right now. But man, and I'm only putting it at 5 right now just because if he can't do it again against the Carolina Panthers, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's a tough one to go after that on that one. So he's, looking more as a solid RB2 at that point. So what you thought would be the elite running back, it's not becoming him. My next guy, and I'm sure you guys are all starting to panic on him, and that's Breece Hall. And for the second consecutive week, Breece Hall is now seeing single-digit carries along with seeing single-digit fantasy points. Not what you expect out of your RB1. Many of us have taken him, top 5, at least top 7 in our fantasy football drafts this season. The insufficiency of this running game has been shown, though, as he only has 27 rushing yards over the last 2 games. And yes, I am laughing at that because what we saw last year out of him, it was just, he was just beast mode. It was great. It was solid fantasy points. We thought with Aaron Rodgers coming back, solidifying this offensive line, we would see more out of Breece Hall. But it just hasn't happened yet. And yes, Braylon Allen has been seeing a lot of time with him on the field. At least fantasy-wise, you see a lot of fantasy points with him. And that being said, I'm gonna say Allen is a thorn in the Hall. But to be honest, Hall was on the field for 74% of the snaps this last game, while Allen took the remaining 26. So yes, it's a split backfield, but Breece Hall is still seeing the majority of the main touches and around the goal line. Looking at fantasy points, you think Allen has definitely seen more, but he hasn't seen any more than 36% of the field, to be honest with you. So for what it's worth, Breece Hall is still the RB1 for this team. The fantasy side of it still kind of scares me. But on the bright side, Hall is out there for the most important downs. But overall, I'm putting Hall as a panic meter for me as a level 4. And he has an opportunity to get that drop. It's kind of been around 2, 3 lately. This last week, I boosted up to 4. But he has a juicy matchup coming up here week 6. Just like Bijan Robinson, it's not as great, but he's getting the Buffalo Bills, who just gave up a big game to Dare Ogunbowale and also gave a rushing touchdown to Cam Akers. And let's not forget, he also just got thrashed, or that they also just got thrashed by Derrick Henry and Justice Hill, both on the ground and through the air. What's Breece Hall good for? On the ground and through the air. But also Braylon Allen, good on the ground and through the air. So it's fun. It's great. I think Breece Hall is going to see a nice bounce back here, but we can't forget Braylon Allen is still going to be that guy there that's going to be splitting, the number 2 back, looking right down his back. On the bright side, though, if you do have both running backs, if anything happens to Hall, Braylon Allen, RB1 upside all the way. So going forward, and then this next week, I'm going to have Breece Hall as a back end RB1. So he's no longer elite to me, but he has the higher end touches, 18 touches a week. But let's hopefully see that he can actually do something with him going forward. My number 3 player this week, and you might be surprised about it because you would say why, and that's Jerome Ford, and it has nothing to do with Ford himself, but more of Nick Chubb coming back. The return window for Nick Chubb has now opened, the 21-day window for him to be activated. Now Ford's time is running out to as a solid RB2. Yeah, he's kind of been more of a back end RB2, but the upside has been there for him. But to be honest with you, I am putting this panic level at a 10. 10 out of 10. And the only reason I'm doing that is because we don't know exactly when Chubb can be back. There's a possibility Chubb can be back within the next couple weeks. There's also a possibility that Chubb doesn't come back until after the Browns' Week 10 bye against New Orleans Saints. We don't know how long it's going to be, but if I can find a needy team that needs a running back right now, I'm going to trade him, and hopefully, I don't know, like you guys, I need wide receivers on my teams right now because I'm very wide receiver needy. I am willing to trade Jerome Ford for a solid wide receiver 2 if possible as of right now. Get out while getting is good, and I would be definitely all about that. My 4th guy this week, we're going to switch over to wide receiver, and that is Diontae Johnson. Now, since Andy Dalton took over, Johnson has caught 15 or 27 passes for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's only been over the last 2 games since he started. Solid, right? Many had Johnson as a must start this week, solid wide receiver 1, just because he was seeing 10 plus targets. Actually, it was 12 and 13 targets, I want to say, during the Dalton era start. But this past week, he fell flat on his face as he only saw 6 targets. So after seeing 20 plus fantasy points over the last 2 weeks, he saw maybe 6, 7, 8, depending on your scoring system. It was single digit. It was ugly. It wasn't what we wanted. Seeing the 6 targets, it just wasn't great. 3 catches, 23 yards, total bomb on us. Also, the Panthers were down big too. So you think they would have actually tried harder, but for some reason that didn't happen. But when they were down, guess who came back? It was Bryce Young. Late in the game. Now, is this a sign of him coming back into the starting lineup? Possibly. We don't know yet. It's something we got to keep an eye on. And that's something I'm definitely for sure keeping an eye on, because as soon as I saw him go out there, I was like, what's going on? Why is Dalton coming off? Okay, yeah, I understand you're down 36-10, but Just keep Dalton out there. Young's not ready yet. Let's go. So as long as Andy Dalton's starting, I like Diontae Johnson as a solid wide receiver too. But if Bryce Young is coming in or going to be, starting starting with the next couple weeks, I'm going to start panicking, especially right away. As soon as I hear it, I'm going to have that panic meter at a solid 5. So I'm going to have it 4 right now just because I'm kind of hesitant on it because they might be switching back and forth, which isn't really good for Bryce Young and his learning capabilities. But we can see that happening. So, like I said, with Andy Dalton there, solid wide receiver too. With Bryce Young coming back, if he comes back, this is if. All right, I'm just assuming that he does. I see Diontae Johnson back to where he was. Bench filler, bye-week replacement flex at best. It could be really bad for as far as we know. And finally, Tank Dell. One player I was super high on. I mean, I loved him all last season, thinking, the rookie, he just dominated with CJ Stroud. The injury got him knocked out a little bit. The sign and trade for Stephon Diggs, the Nico Collins exploding onto the scene. Everyone kind of had these two as 1, 2, 3 with Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell as number 3 drafted. However, it's just been Diggs and Collins who have made their mark while we're still waiting for Dell to actually make his mark like we saw last season. And within it was 9 snaps in, Collins got injured with a hamstring injury. So you're thinking, great, this is the time for Dell to explode. Finally see that 2023 guy that we all loved and fall in love with, enjoyed watching, play and gets those fantasy points and started him as our solid wide receiver too. And that didn't happen. And just when we thought Dell would step up in the absence of Nico Collins, it was Xavier Hutchinson who stepped in. And not only did he step in, but he also was on the field 71% of the time compared to Tank Dell's 68% of the time. Yeah, okay, it was 2 more snaps, but I wish I could say, this is going to be a Dell game. And it's hard for me to trust Dell going forward, as, most of us have been really already struggling to trust him, especially with his injury, as he seems to have a hard time getting over this injury bug. And I can't even see him anything more than a flex. Even right now, it's flex at best. So I'm putting him as a panic of 8 right now. As like a panic of 8. I'm trying to trade him if anyone wants him for anything. If not, if he has another bad game, I am going to go do as far as drafting him and getting the next best waiver wire party out there, because it's not player's name that gets me fantasy points. It's players who can score fantasy points that get me the fantasy points. All right. Don't worry about the names, people. It doesn't matter how big they are. If they're not performing, drop them off your team. All right. Let's have fun this week. All right. That's going to do it for the panic meter for week 6. Let me hear what you guys have. Shoot them down in the comments for me. Are there any players that I missed that you're panicking on? Do you agree with the ones I'm panicking on? Let's hear it. I want to know. I'll answer all your questions all the time, anytime I can. So once again, oh man, I already messed that up. I reread that wrong. My bad. But this will do it for the week's panic meter. Like I said already, send the questions down below if you have any. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Ryan Miner for the Face Off Sports Network. I'll see you guys next week.